Now, obviously, we can't change the families we grow up in, but we can work to understand those inherited attitudes and patterns of behavior that are still shaping our marriage.
And it's you and me, babe, whatever comes. Knowing bigger hands are holding ours, and our greatest days are ahead of us. Growing in love, learning to be a better us.
Hi there, welcome to A Better Us and to our home. We're so glad you're here.
One thing you may not know about Anne is that she's a sucker for a good period piece romance movie. And that's usually when I find something much more exciting to watch, maybe with a bit more action and explosions.
I call those spit and shoot movies because they're just spitting and shooting constantly. And he can have them because I prefer to be transported back to a simpler time and enjoying the customs, the clothing, and the poetic language of those beautiful bygone eras. You know what I'm talking about. And one of those old customs is the dowry, which was usually the money a bride would bring into the marriage, okay?
Now coming up, Neil and Sharol Josephson have a new twist on this plot, suggesting that all spouses today bring into the marriage what they call a relational dowry. And those can be both positive and negative. And you'll want to stay tuned to hear their insights.
And later, psychologist Dr. Harrison Mungal says that we all have what he calls an emotional junk room. You know, that place where we stuff a lot of things we want to keep hidden or we don't want to deal with?
And inevitably, the door to that room bursts open and spills out onto those closest to us, like our spouse. Dr. Mungal will give us some wisdom for dealing with our junk.
And as usual, our kitchen couples will be all over these topics, and it all starts right now.
Back in the day, brides used to come into a marriage with something called a dowry. Depending on the culture, it was money or land or cows. I brought nothing.
Neither did I.
Together we had $300 between us. But both of us had what we call a relational dowry. That's the life experiences, the habits, the values, the attitudes we each brought with us. And much of that relational dowry has been inherited from our families of origin.
Now, obviously, we can't change the families we grow up in, but we can work to understand those inherited attitudes and patterns of behavior that are still shaping our marriage. Like maybe we say, you know, well, my parents did it like this, so that's the way we're going to do it. Or maybe you say, that's the way my parents did it, we're never going to do it that way. In either case, we're still being influenced, aren't we, by our family of origin. One of the most surprising things we've discovered in almost 20 years of full-time marriage ministry is how oblivious a lot of us are to this reality. Now, we've actually developed a whole 1-hour session focusing on this, and we baked it into our weekend getaway because it's such an important topic and a big blind spot for a lot of us. We can think that our issues are really just about the two of us, when in fact they're rooted much, much earlier in our relational dowries.
For example, in my family growing up, we didn't do conflict. I don't remember ever seeing my parents fight, ever. And if my siblings and I ever had conflict, we were told to go to our room, and when we calmed down, we could come back out, which made for a beautiful, peaceful home. But Neil and I get married, and about 5 minutes in, we have our first fight, and I had no clue what to do except to go to my room, which awkwardly enough was now our room. We have figured it out. We've figured out how to do conflict, and we've actually gotten really quite good at it. But that was some of our relational dowry.
Again, we can't change our families. One writer said it this way: you're born into your family, and your family's born into you. No returns, no exchanges. That's good. But we can be aware of what our families have passed on to us. And some of it's wonderful, and we should be grateful. Some of our relational dowries may be painful and even toxic, and we will need some healing and likely some help in order to move towards health. But it all starts with becoming aware that we have a relational dowry.
Well, we are back in the kitchen with our kitchen couples. We've got Dan and Danielle and Mike and Diane.
All right. Well, relational dowry, that's kind of an interesting
Never
way
heard
to
it
put
said
it.
that way.
Yeah. You know, what are you bringing into your marriage? You know, it's not cows or chickens. In my case, it might be a turkey. Referring to me. Or maybe it's an unhealthy idea, how to resolve conflict that you learned in your childhood, or how to handle money. There could be a whole host of different type of these things in your dowry that you bring into marriage. And it could be positive or negative habits as well that you've learned. And so, what do you guys think? Hey, what are your thoughts when you heard that?
Well, initially, I'll jump in. Initially, when I heard it, I was like, in my family, when you were resolving conflict, the temperature got high sometimes, and it was okay. It was almost expected. And when I started to date Diane, I can sometimes, like, I'm generally a kind of gentle guy, but when I start to talk, right, when you start to get in, I can sound like I'm on a football field, right? So that's and I've really tried to work to tame that. Tone is so important. It's not always what you say, but how you say it.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree. I know for me, growing up in my family, coming from a big family, but I did, like my dad, he was a drinker. And so I would see he and my mom, he would have too much to drink, they would get into an argument, and I would see those things. And I remember always saying to myself, I don't ever want that in my house. I don't ever want my husband and I to argue. I don't want to have, conflict. I don't want to marry anyone that drink. Like, this whole list of things that I didn't want to take into my marriage. And so one of the things that when Mike and I got together, I said to him, I don't like arguing. I don't like conflict. I'm not good with those things, right? And so we've always made it a point to try our best not to get in these, big, heated, ugly confrontations, because first of all, it gets you nowhere. Right? Just use your words. Use your words, and there's a gentle way to use your words. If you do that, things are so much better.
Yeah.
Right? If you can learn to do those things and do them properly.
Yeah. The whole idea of the relational dowry is basically, it's a fancy way to say baggage. Our baggage that we carry, and sometimes we think that we have to carry it forever. But I've been actually reading a lot of brain science books lately, and in that I've been kind of learning the science of the brain and how it can actually change. We can actually be our own little microsurgeons and change the way we thought, which means, we're in the captain's seat, we decide. So in our marriage, we don't have to say, well, it's always been that way. Well, I came from a negative house. I came from this situation. It's just, that's how we are. We can actually create a new normal for us, a Dan and Danielle version, a Mike and Diane, an Ann and Ron version of taking the good from our past and maybe editing some of the things that weren't so good and weren't serving us well, and then create the new normal. We don't have to be stuck in the past. We can change our future.
Right. Even if you came from a dysfunctional past in some way, that you get to set the tone for moving forward for what your family. Let's say we've always been. You're talking about we're not being victims. We're not claiming that we're victims. Our frames of reference and our family of origin are very different. We've mentioned that, like the first season. I remember mentioning that, But I mean, there's a beauty in marrying somebody who's different than you. God gives us somebody who's very different than us. Danielle and I are very different from each other in some ways. Like, there's a lot of what you might say is incompatibility, but it's not about incompatibility. It's how you make yourselves compatible in the middle of that. And God gives us someone very different than ourselves, which gives us a chance to become more like Christ. Because we have to coexist and live and learn to be less selfish. Because marriage is an exercise in learning to be less selfish. And some people think, a marriage is supposed to, make me happy, and this person is supposed to, like all the things I like. We're going to be soulmates and everything. Well, marriage isn't about first and foremost about being happy. Hopefully, it's going to make you happy. But marriage, first and foremost, is about being made to be more like Christ. And your marriage is supposed to kill you. It's supposed to kill you. It's supposed to kill the selfishness in you. And
Sometimes it feels that way.
And working through those things makes us more like Christ. So yes, dowries, we're very different, but there's some beauty in that. Rather than butt heads, and rather than say, oh, I should go find somebody else. No, you work through that, and it makes you more like Christ.
So I guess the question would be, practically speaking, how do we do that? Like, we all realize that, yes, we bring in baggage, we bring in these dowries.
Can you change, or is it baked into the wedding cake, so to speak? Is it? Can the leopard change his spot? So sometimes people can use it as an excuse. I'm just that way. I can't change.
Yes, I've heard.
But you can make those incremental things and make sure.
Like Dan was saying, a wedding or a marriage is all about growing together. You're not going to be the same person you were the day you got married as you are 30 years down the road. You're growing together in the same direction. So give grace to each other. You're both learning how to do this us thing well, and it's going to take a minute to kind of get in a good rhythm. And so give each other grace. Live empathetically. Try to see it from your partner's point of view, and then remove emotion from it. So, if this is the way that we've always done it, my parents always did it this way, and if you're called out on it, and even it's not healthy, you might get defensive and say, but no, my parents always did it this way. Just remove the emotion out and say, okay, we want to live our marriage out in the best Christ-centered way possible so that we can grow together in a good way.
Yeah, and give each other the right to be wrong.
Good.
Give each other the right
and
to
the
be
space
wrong.
and the
It's
freedom
okay.
and the safety.
That's right.
And I will say one important thing. When we are inside ourselves and in our marriage, we can often see an outside source can help you see what you want to change.
Bring some clarity.
Absolutely.
Okay, good discussion, guys.
Clarity here.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
And stay with us. More and Better Us coming up.
Yay.
We cannot go back in time and change maybe some who have been abused and brought into the relationship, some who have experienced a lot of traumas that brought into a relationship, probably mistakes we have made. We all make them from time to time. Those things can hold us captive and bondage from moving into the future that God has designed for us.
Hey friends, Ron and Ann here. We're so glad you're with us at A Better Us, and we pray your marriage is blessed as you take this in.
Be sure and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and enjoy this video.
When I look at relationships sometimes, I see that there's a lot of junk that is accumulated with time. In fact, I give this homework where I ask couples to draw a heart, and they need to map it out in 9 different segments. 8 is like all the positive things you like in relationship, but there's one room, I call it the junk room. And that junk room reminds me of a sitcom, maybe you heard about it, in terms of where some of us may have OCDs and we kind of push everything in that junk room. And then maybe your spouse open up the junk room and it all falls out on you. Well, the brain, I believe sometimes it can accumulate so much junk that as we're getting older, the lock in this junk room gets rusty and it breaks open and all this junk comes out. And we have flashbacks, we have nightmares, we have intrusive thoughts, we cannot sleep because they're just floating through the mind and it affects our sleeping, etc. So I encourage individuals, when there are situations that you're encountering in life, whether it's from the past or the present, it's so important to be able to put closure to it, to come to terms with it. The reality is we cannot change the past. That's a reality. We cannot go back in time and change maybe some who have been abused and brought into the relationship, some who have experienced a lot of traumas that brought into a relationship, probably mistakes we have made. We all make them from time to time, and perhaps some regrets that we have, but the reality is those things can hold us captive and bondage from moving into the future that God has designed for us. I like to look at the junk in our life as a springboard into our future, or look at them as fertilizers that can fertilize your garden, that you can have a blossoming future that you can pass on to your children and to the generation after you. That's the concept you need to create. Nothing is used for waste in life. You use it for benefits because we cannot change it anyway, so why allow the enemy to even use it to shift us from our destiny? So if you in your relationship, you're saying, yeah, maybe there are some junk in my life. There are some situations there that I'm struggling with, and it's popping up, and I see it's affecting, probably intimacy, affecting communication, affecting maybe some of the behaviors. I would say the best thing to do is to come to terms with it and learn how to separate it from yourself, even if it means writing a letter and detaching it from yourself and burning the letter and actually seeing in your mind that you're getting rid of it, it's getting away from you, that when it pops up again or tries to pop up in the future, you tell yourself, hey, that memory that I created, I can see it being burnt and it's no longer there, and it's going to help you to stay focused for your future. It's a good way to deal with those junk in the room.
Well, welcome to our kitchen, where we quickly cleaned up some clutter for the lights and cameras to come around, and we put it all in a back room there somewhere. Not true. But we want to welcome our kitchen couples. Yes. Hey, Mike and Diane, and Eric and Kara.
Yes. Okay.
The junk room.
I love the visual that Dr. Harris and Mungal gave about the junk room, because, like Ron was saying, actually we do have some junk drawers.
Don't we all?
There's a junk drawer right over there.
Actually, things that you don't really know what to do with. You're kind of like, I got it in my hands, but I don't know what to do with it. So I'm just going to stuff it in here and I'll think about it later. Or I think about maybe never.
You call it the everything drawer.
I call it the everything drawer. I've always called it that since you were little. Yeah, the everything drawer. But so many times in our own lives, we find that we have these things in our hands, these emotions, these memories, and we don't know what to do with them. So we just stuff them away somewhere. And we think, okay, I'll deal with it later, or maybe never. And then what happens? What do we do?
It starts to accumulate, and
it can become a problem.
I like to think of that junk room as a period, right? Because it's over, right? But it's also going to turn into an exclamation mark, right? Because it's going to define who my later self is, right? And so when most things in life is not what they are, because there's not a lot new, right? When we look at things that happen and all of the, they're different for each individual, right? But we can look as we're doing here. We're talking about a subject matter, right? That subject, that larger subject, it's different for each one of us, right? But it is that subject, and if we can find a way, right, to or find it in us to understand that. That period was necessary to form the paragraph, right? Or the whole story, right? So that is a part of the process, and it's a natural part of the process. The best baseball player in the world hits 300 and something. That means he fails 7 out of 10 times, right? Yeah. And so we all have a lot of junk in the drawer, right? Yeah. It really is about understanding that junk is genius if we continue to use it and refine and grow and develop.
That's good. That's good. That's true. We all come with something. We all have baggage. The Bible tells us we are all like filthy rags, right? But he can come in and he can clean all that junk up, and he can make us pure and white as snow. So we have to remember that no matter what we're going through, no matter what baggage we're carrying, no matter what drawer we stuff it in, God can clean it all up and he can make us look brand new.
The key to that is we have to open the drawer.
That's it.
We have to open the closet.
Allow him.
Because he's given us free will.
That's right.
And he's not going to force his way into our lives. He's waiting for us to say, okay, Diane, I can make a beautiful exclamation mark out of that junk, but give me access to it.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
That's it.
Yeah, I like that Harrison Mungal gave that visual of just set it on fire. Just he's like write it down and burn it. Separate yourself from that and set it on fire. But because it is behind you. But I do like he also mentioned use it as fertilizer. He said use it as fertilizer. You've learned from this. You've acknowledged it. You've dealt with it. You've learned from it. And use that as fertilizer to grow in your relationship to the future.
You might see it as manure, but use it as fertilizer, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and then you'll see the fruits of it in your family or in yourself. And I also think another key importance is learning what junk you should face together and what junk you need to face alone in your healing process. And so there are some things in my junk drawer that I need to face head on myself, that Eric can support me and pray for me and be my partner in it, but that doesn't mean I put that on him to also help heal me. And so
there's things that are more just, it's between you and God, and I'm here as a support. I've seen that.
And then there's things that together we will face in that junk drawer. It will not.
And sometimes that junk tries to come back. It tries to remind you of this. And that's when you have to do what the Bible says, take every thought captive under the authority of Jesus and say to that junk, I've already dealt with you, and
I've already set you on fire.
Yes, Jesus says you're gone. You are manure that I'm using to move forward, to turn into something much better, so I'm not going to go there anymore.
And when we're followers of Jesus, we've come to the point of putting our faith and trust in Him. We believe in Him. We've opened the door to our heart. We've let Him inside, and it's like a home. Maybe we let Him into the entranceway, and but maybe we haven't given him access to all the rooms yet. Maybe he's come into the living room a bit, maybe into the kitchen. We have a little fellowship there. But Jesus, you're not going to go near this room over here.
I still hold the master key.
And maybe because there's shame. I don't want to open that door to you. I just want to keep that as my private room. But that's not making him Lord. That's not giving him access. He wants to walk you through it with you and help you clean some things up. Because when you come to Jesus, you give your life to Him, that's just the beginning. There's a whole process that never ends in our whole life.
And it's a beautiful process.
It is. And I remember one counselor that he said what he does with people who need some inner healing and some cleaning up some of the junk, that he takes them back to maybe where that hurt happened. He helps them to just gently open that door and go back to that time, maybe it's in your childhood, and then picture Jesus there with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Turning the script around and giving you truth at that moment, and where it was so painful and hurting, but just say Jesus is there with you. He loves you, and He wants to hold you there. He embraces you at that moment. And it just kind of brings that healing, and it's certainly a very positive way to deal with that junk room is to allow Jesus access and say, take it away, clean me up, every part of me, and that's an ongoing process our whole lives.
Absolutely. Open the door, open the drawer, invite God's presence in to help you just clean it out and get rid of it so you can move forward whole and healed. Yeah.
All right, good stuff, guys. Thanks so much for the discussion.
Thanks for being with us. Stay with us, though. There's more to come.
We're ready.
We're only 15 years into this. A tip, I think, is the communication angle. It's something that was flagged early on in our marriage, that we have to figure out how to better communicate and just to do the work.
It's being quick to respond with a "I'm sorry, please forgive me" for my part. And it's not, when you're asking your spouse to forgive you or saying you're sorry, it's not saying that you're all to blame for it. It's taking ownership for your part in it.
Just don't assume, because that will cause you to take action just based on something that could not be true.
Two things: do things together, because you are one. And the second, I think, is don't let the sun go down on your anger.
Remember the good things and do those good things more often. It's kind of a rinse and repeat, because the more you do those good things, is the better you're going to be able to nurture your relationship.
To let the other person have time by themselves, or like be able to just kind of have that space where you don't feel like you're losing yourself only being married.
And I think it's a good tip for any married couple out there, that there's going to be fights. You know, there's going to be fight, but you got to learn to win at home.
For more marriage encouragement, follow A Better Us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
And subscribe for your free weekly Marriage Moment email at abetterus.tv.
Well, thanks for being with us today as we looked at some great marriage topics.
Neil and Sharol encouraged us to consider what we've brought into our marriage in terms of a relational dowry, those positive or negative habits formed during our growing up years that have shaped how we relate to those closest to us.
And Dr. Harrison Mungal shared a thought-provoking analogy about how we all have an inner junk room, where we stuff things away that we don't want to deal with and would rather hide.
It's easy to stuff pain and trauma into that room, but you know what? That door will eventually spring open at some point and spill your mess onto those closest to you, like your spouse and your kids.
Some junk in that room may require professional help to properly deal with it and take it to the curb. But there's much to be said for allowing God to have access to that hidden part of our life.
Absolutely. God already knows what's in there, and He still loves us with unconditional acceptance. As Ron pointed out, sometimes we're content with receiving Jesus as our Savior, but we hold back from truly giving Him all of our lives, every nook and cranny. But when you are totally surrendered to God, that's when you experience true freedom, the kind that only comes from genuine openness with Him.
If you have questions about how to get to that place of surrendering your life to Jesus, or if you'd just like someone to pray with you about what you're currently dealing with, please call our 24/7 prayer line. And you also may want to check out further encouragement available on our website.
Well, thank you again for joining us. And remember, with God, there is always hope to become a better us.
Hey friends, we really hope you're enjoying the marriage conversations here with A Better Us on our YouTube channel.
We have hundreds of more helpful marriage videos designed to give you hope and tools to make your marriage better.
And you can see just a few options we think you might like here and here.
Enjoy! Oh, and make sure you subscribe by clicking here so you don't miss out on all the great marriage help we have coming your way soon.